This conference will now be recorded.
Sorry, Mr. Chairman. I believe Kim has started the report.
Jim, you good? Y'all good back here? Like to call the Board of Supervisors to order. Let's start with the pledge and a moment of silence. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thank you. We do have a quorum. We do need to adopt an agenda. I want to restructure the agenda. Like to make number one a capital line item transfer. Then number two, I want to talk about admin fees. And then number three will be the current administrative budget presentation. Anybody else have anything? All good?
Yeah.
What would y'all like to do?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
Motion's made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Public comment. Public comment. All right. Anybody watching us? That's pretty good. That's pretty good. All right. All right. Let's move right into this. Let's talk about the capital line item transfer. Mr. Weekly?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Basically, in your FY25 capital budget, specifically the HVAC line item, we had 37 allocated. The CID building, we had planned on replacing the unit over there. I think it's a 3.5 ton. Since that time, we had a 3.5 ton over War Memorial fail. So we did reach out to Riddleberger. We have proposals. Again, we had 37 budgeted. The proposal came back at $42,671. That is our contractor. We have a cooperative procurement, so we could use them right away. Jennifer and I reviewed capital line items to see, all right, is there a delta somewhere we can recommend? There was a little over $7,000 remaining in our roofing line item. In order to transfer money into capital, that can't be by us without board approval. It doesn't require a resolution, but it does at least take a voice vote and approval. Staff is recommending that you realign or move $5,500 from the roof capital line item over to the HVAC capital line item.
This is an opportunity for 2 words.
So moved.
There you go.
Second.
The motion made and seconded. Anybody have any questions?
No.
All right. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Okay.
Let's go to admin fees.
All right, I think those may be in the folder, administrative fees. Since we spoke last, and I'm gonna just do a quick summary of the recommended fees, and then I also have an email from Annette. Since our last meeting, I asked her to go out and do some research and come back so I can have some follow-up with the board. At your last meeting, we were recommending the commercial hauler fee go up from the existing $65 per ton to $70 per ton. That was based on, we looked at surrounding community, well, we looked at two communities, because not every community has a transfer station. Some have landfills, so you gotta look at your same operation. Greene County was at $70 per ton. Culpeper was at $71.50. That also is the going rate, tonnage rate for debris, so whether that's woody, usually it's woody debris. So that's what staff's recommending, and I believe you all were fine with that. The other administrative fee at that time was was a suggested $5 increase on the dog. Since then, Annette said she'd also like to see $5 on the cats. She did put forth an email. Can you bring that email up? I think it's in that folder. I asked her to go research the surrounding communities, whether tiers or different adoption rates, and her email is, and I believe I sent this around to members prior. She was not seeing a differential per se of small dog, big dog. I think the only variance she saw for dogs, Orange County, for whatever reason, has a different adoption rate if you're in county versus out of county, so there is a difference there. She said Culpeper County had a flat rate of 120. We'll get back to the cats in a minute. Greene County had a rate of 95. And then Rappahannock had $200 a dog. She went as far as say the reason why they're higher, they do things like microchipping and whatever NextGuard Plus is. I don't know if that's a flea and tick thing or whatever. Is that what it is? All right, thank you. My wife takes care of that, so I didn't know. What she recommended, so I was like, all right, can you give me a little breakdown of why you think we need to, if you're advocating for a flat rate versus a small versus large dog type of adoption rate, give me what that is. She said increased adoption, so a lower fee can make pet ownership more accessible. She doesn't want to price this out of the market. Faster placement of hard-to-place animals. She feels like if they're harder to place, they stay around the shelter longer. It could cause a situation where, I forget the technical term, but when they're there longer, it could develop health maybe, not all the time, but generally behavioral issues because you're confined. So the concern's that there. The last one I don't like to talk about, but if you have animals that are, you just cannot place them, or whether it's adoption or rescue, you euthanize essentially. So she also felt this isn't a driving factor as well, but this is one of the things that dealing with even nominations, so less change. $100 is better than having to make change. Maybe $5 or whatever you give them back, but it was an easier rate. On the cats, she recommended going up $5. She gave some rates for cats. It looks like cats are $50 out of county, $45 in county. When it comes to Orange County, they're $60 in Culpeper. They're not, Greene County doesn't do cats. Let's see, their cats are adopted through Humane Society, so I don't know what that is. And she did not list a price for cats she did not list a price for cats on Rappahannock. She said a small increase of $5 for each cat and dog is a great start. Again, makes you competitive, is why she's making those recommendations. So I at least wanted to bring back her analysis and recommendations, as I would do with any department head. As you may recall, based on what you all determine is what we are advertised. So if you go back to the other form, those are denoted in red. We would not advertise this until you make a decision. What I'm going to look into, and I apologize I haven't done it yet, I need to get my hand in, is the fees treated the same as the tax. As you know, our tax rate public hearing will be separate than the budget because the state code requires it. If this is not required to be separate, we would just do this the same night. either as your tax rates or if I have enough time on advertising, or at your May 13th budget public hearing. So that's staff recommendation. However, I want to be respectful. I know we talked about different tiers, so I don't want to lose sight of that. I'm just bringing back staff recommendations and a little more research that Annette brought forth.
I want to keep it simple, just go with that.
All right, complicated, Judd. Go ahead, yeah.
That's my job. No, what's the cost when there's a resident loses a dog and it's picked up and taken to the pound, and then
There's a boarding fee for that.
that might be another place. Again, this isn't big money, but this might
Right.
cover
Well, we haven't advertised yet, so this is a good time to,
maybe the boarding cost or that fee for picking up that dog and delivering it.
yeah, she had, let me go to another, there is, so it's $5 a day boarding fee. What I will say, and I think it's in that note there, they'll waive it, so a small domestic animal, that's a cat or dog. If the owner comes back within 24 hours, because sometimes people will pick, it's the craziest things, and I'm not blaming all out-of-towners, but they're in the community, they say, oh, this dog's running wild, let me pick it up, take it to the shelter. That's not your fault, you're at work and somebody decided to claim your dog. So that's why we generally, technically, we could charge $5, but we're like, look, if you claim it within 24 hours, how much cost do we really have in it? It's just kind of the right thing. Beyond that, it's a $5 per day fee. We could look at raising that. Let me go to Annette's. I think she had some additional, hers may have been more on the livestock side. There were some additional things she recommended, and I said, well, maybe we want to wait and not do them all at one time. I don't think it's out of reason if you want to take up, I don't know, 5 to 10. We would still do the 24-hour reduction.
Food costs, that type of thing. And so $10 instead of 5, or,
Right.
it's not gonna kill somebody.
I don't think it will, because again, we'll still do the courtesy unless y'all tell us otherwise. Like, if it's less than 24 hours, we'll do that. Food, it's hard. I mean, I can tell you what a bag of food costs. We can go out there. Food's hard to say how much we have true cost in that, because that's one of the areas that folks are kind and donating regularly, and we're thankful for that. So continue if folks are listening at home. But you definitely would have, your normal heating and cooling. I mean, that area is heated and cooled. I don't know how often we shampoo a dog or whatever, but I'm sure there's.
Cost to pick up the dog, it's a cost to process it, keep it for a couple of days, there's a cost there.
There is.
Your out-of-town neighbor might have them picked up, that's not your fault, but there's still a cost there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And sometimes if folks, I don't know why they may choose to wait out, but there have been some cases where if they wait too long or the time they come and reach out to us, they see a $50 fee, they may say, I'm just going to surrender it to you. It doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen. Yeah.
I think that's a pretty good cost. If I'm
Well,
going
no,
on
I know. I'm afraid
going on
he's gonna take
vacation.
Ernest. Oh, it's a real problem.
What if they'll board my horse for $5?
Yeah, I know. No, we're-
I didn't want to spend a lot of time on it, but I just.
Yeah, she felt like I'm going through her additional notes here. I don't think she gave me a dollar amount, but she did say she wanted to see about raising the animal control intake fee. That must be the impoundment fee. And then, as well as, the livestock adoption. She felt we were really low on that. I don't know how often we adopt out. We'll get an occasional, pig or something. I don't know if that really does a lot for us. Hopefully, we're not getting a lot of pigs. But she did mention the intake fee, which is that $12 fee. Didn't say what she would recommend in that, and that might have been because I said, let's just go for these cat and dogs now, because I realize there are other fees you're gonna look at. But certainly, sir, if you'd like to go up to, say, $10, we could certainly do that. Okay, so boarding fees will,
I love these conversations that we can only have here in Madison. Oh, yeah. This is the best deal on a pig
do you,
yet.
so there's 2 boarding fees. So there's a boarding fee for your small domestic, which is the animal and the dog, the dog or the cat, which I think we're talking about. So that would take that from 5 to 10. We would advertise. Anything on the large domestic animal, horse, cow, goat, sheep, pig, we have that at $10 per day. Do we want to take that to 15 or?
Very few.
Yeah, it's very few. We don't want to keep, we try to either put them back in the fields where they came out of, or if a neighbor farmer says, hey, for now, put them in mine till Bob or whoever can pick them up.
Is your recommendation to go to the advised 180 and then 70 on commercial and wood debris, and then raise the annual or the daily rate for impoundment from $5 to $10?
Yeah.
Everybody good with that?
Yeah.
I agree.
So the small animals, are we doing anything with the larger? Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Anything else on admin fees?
No, these are the fun part. This is why I said
yeah,
this
it's
is the
gonna get real
softball.
serious real
You're getting ready to
quick,
get
so-
fast pitch, so
This
that's
is great. All right, let's go to the administrative budget.
I left the fun for you.
Oh, no, it's pretty good, Ms. Warren.
No, it's a lot of
not.
thought and work went into
Yeah,
this.
it's pretty
You want
good.
this one or that one, whichever is fine with me.
I'm gonna let you, do
Okay.
you mind?
I don't mind at all. Drive? Yeah, yeah.
That's
Let me
just
plug
because you
in.
don't want to use that computer.
Yeah, let me bring up the presentation and I will do that.
Thank you. We did print out a copy. Unfortunately, it printed on double-sided, so my apologies, but you should have a
You find it
copy.
online, Gracie? It's on the website now, yeah. Yeah. Good job, Kim Turner.
I'm so sorry.
So the column that says FY '26 administrative changes, that's the current budget proposed.
Which,
Is that right?
you're jumping ahead.
Oh, the next
Yeah,
page.
yes, that's correct. That's correct.
This one? Ooh, good point. Good one.
Yeah.
It's
there's
not
one.
their changes.
And actually, let me,
So it's in the.
it's in the OneDrive. I can download this and do it. It's not a problem.
They went through a bunch of this with me earlier. I think this is like the simplest.
Yeah.
It is a very complicated issue, but it is, the conveyance of it is very
Yeah.
easy. I mean, it's just,
Budget meeting,
you gotta give some credit to that.
10, and then admin budget. Should be that right there. PowerPoint's fine. PowerPoint's fine. I don't see you up on the screen. Oh, you got to plug in. All right. Good afternoon, Board. I did want to quickly go over on the next slide, the agenda for this meeting, and I'm going to try to go slower so that you can ask questions after each slide. In the presentation, I'm first going to talk about the department, schools, social services, and capital funding amounts that we have gotten to based on the board's feedback. Also going to talk about the outside agency funding list. And then I'm going to go into capital budget breakdown. After speaking with the schools yesterday, we did a final run-through of the capital budget needs, so I'll talk through that. And then there's 3 scenarios that we're going to talk to. The first one is scenario 1 is a 3-cent no debt funding increase debt budget. The second one is a 2-cent $6 million debt funding, and the third scenario is 2-cent no debt funding. So the next slide, I put together a couple columns here for you to note. The far left is the FY25 approved budget amounts. The next column to that is the budget requests, the original requests by the department or the actual entity, whether it be the schools or social services. And then there's another green column towards the right there that is our administrative changes and our recommendations for budget. And if you notice at the very bottom, we were able to reduce the budget down right at $2.1 million. Now, that does include capital between the schools and the county. But a couple to highlight, EMS budget was one that had some cuts based on power shift being removed. There are no new positions at all in any of the departments except Parks and Rec. That department agency does have one conversion from part-time to full-time position. But every other department, there are no new positions at all, no power shift in EMS. Again, the school capital, CIP and CARP, that number, the $1,938,826, as opposed to the $2.4 million number, that's after sitting down with the schools and going through yesterday their CIP and capital needs one more time. The debt service fund, I actually listed that in here. And then as you scroll down, the county's capital went from 1.9 million. We cut it down to we were able to cut it down to 861,000 for FY26. And then as you can see, just going down the list, we were able to make cuts pretty much across the board where we could. I do want to note, I separated out the radio tower maintenance from the county admin budget just so that the general public and the board could see this is a new expense to the county. So a little more than halfway down, you'll see county admin radio tower maintenance. We now, with the radio project being completed, we are at $297,477 per year in maintenance fees that we will have as a county. So that line item is new. And so overall, the budget for the department, school board, social services, and capital went from $35,381,083 down to $33,282,987, if my eyes are correct here, with a reduction again of $2.1 million. So it was 12% increase from FY25, and we have it down to 5.4% increase. And I'll pause to see if there's anything you want to drill into on any of these departments.
Anybody?
Well, the only thing I was thinking about this would be an overall thing is, so we've got stuff in already, like the comp board numbers are solid. Nothing coming out of Richmond that could play a part in stuff that we know of at this point.
We do, and I should have mentioned that there is the 3% COLA, and the comp board funding is in the revenues and also on the expense side, what will be reimbursed. All of that's in there.
So comp board, they came through with some numbers instead of being really late.
Oh, yes, the 6% for dispatchers,
Yes.
and that's reflected in the
Okay.
budget as well.
All right.
The only thing, Mr. Yao, that, and it's up for the schools and their budget. I think I sent y'all some literature, as the General Assembly was going on, our lobbyists would send information I would pass along. I usually have some kind of summary in there. The bill that was proposed to lift the cap on support positions, the General Assembly passed that, and that would have meant, I think it was around $210K of extra monies that would flow into the schools. It's my understanding, and I talked a little bit at our meeting yesterday with Anna, that the governor made adjustments, so it wouldn't be that full 210. I think maybe they're getting about 50,000 of that, so 50 of the original 210 that was coming. So on the county side, as Jennifer said, we've captured a COLA. The other General Assembly thing that passed and was signed was that additional 6% for dispatchers. That's in there. We don't see anything else at this time that could impact the county from the state's budget.
And I forgot to mention on CSA, our local contribution, I had originally thought it would be best to flat fund and then just use joint stabilization fund. However, thinking more about how their budget is built with the state, I do think we need to go from the 675 up to 750, and then they had requested the 896, but if we go up to the 750, then we still will probably leverage, if we need to, the joint stabilization fund. But their budget's built with the states, kind of built on what we give them. So I think it's best, and because we know that they're going to need more funding to go up to that 750.
Anybody?
Quick question about the schools, and I'm not sure this, you guys have that information, but one of the big questions I think as we were going through this, at least for me, was what are they doing as far as new positions in their budget?
All right, I'm only gonna read off of, Anna gave me a slide. I made some notes. So you may recall when they were before us, and I think then they went and had a different budget presentation possibly with the school board. So their number went from, it was somewhat north of 1 million, forgive me not remember if it was 1.2 or 1.4, down to, based on comments made in this boardroom, down to 677, 799. What we communicated to them yesterday, based on our administrative recommended revisions to you all last week, which included the school, was like 309 and some change. So we just said 310 is what we're looking at. And we went over, hey, we're taking the bus out, 150 and so forth. So that immediately got their attention. It was good conversation, wasn't adversarial, none of that. But that's where they took the position of, instead of, because they want to get back to that 677, not the 310 that we recommended to you all. So they went back and said, okay, let's look at our capital projects, and we'd rather keep people, maybe defer some of those capital projects. So I'm just gonna run through those capital projects, and it equals $212K if they defer. Foregoing the $60,000 for fan coils, foregoing the $45,000 maintenance vehicle, foregoing the $30,000 for school board office windows, foregoing, there was $71,000 for exterior doors for district-wide, didn't say schools, just district-wide. Mr. Timmons said he would like to keep 19 there. These doors are expensive, but there are at least some doors they need to address. So that would mean a 52K reduction, total of 212K. That doesn't get them back to the 677. So we last week were recommending the 309, or if you want to round up to 310. If the board is fine with their deferral, I don't know if you want to elect to put that 212 that they're forgoing capital over to their operating. That would bring the number, I think, to 522. It still leaves a capital project of the Waverly Elementary School air handlers with the BAS control system at $1.752 million. So that was their recommendations yesterday.
Thank you, Jonathan.
The question should be, is deferring this stuff an irresponsible action based on deterioration of our facilities?
Yes.
I think that what we have to do is go through this presentation, keep the 310 plus the 211 potentially in mind. Let's go through the whole thing. At the end of this, depending on which way it goes, I think that we need to, and I think it's CIP's responsibility to do, and I'd asked Cardi earlier if he's available on Tuesday. I would like to go into CIP with the school CIP members and really, I hate to say it like this, but to gut this list and really identify priorities for the next 2 or 3 years moving out, because the idea of some of these things kind of popping up at last minute definitely does not work as far as the CIP committee and the intended purpose, but I think that will also talk about,
Yeah, I want to talk about that.
potentially what we do with option 2 or scenario 2 that she's about to get to. Can we come back to schools at the tail of this, Ms. Moore?
Absolutely.
I had one thing, Mr. Chairman, I'd like
Please.
to add about schools, and
Yes.
then I'm going to politely zip it so Jennifer can get through her great presentation. Jennifer asked a very good question, or many good questions, but the one pointed question yesterday was, how much do you think you're going to turn back in? Because she's gone back through from FY21 to present and looked at budget versus actual variances. And we know FY25 will give it to you. There's probably some influx like we had to of COVID money or ESSER money or whatever. But how much do you think you're going to turn back this year? They were rarely reserved in giving a number. I can understand after they explained it. There's an ADM. I'm not an expert in it, but it looks like average daily monitoring. So there's a certain part of the year, usually around March, they have to report the amount of days kids are in school. I think everything's built around 200 days. If it's less than that, there's this formula that deducts. which ultimately means a reduction in state funding. So until they can get through that report, I think they may have submitted the report.
She said she'll know in May.
Yeah. So in May, they may be a little closer. What we did ask was, hey, as soon as you do know, please let us know. We're going to a public hearing May 13th with the budget. The sooner you know, the better, because there could be some turnback funds that help us all when it comes to the FY26 budget. So that's all I had on school, unless there's other questions right now.
But we don't have
I'm sorry, those turn back
a
funds
swag even.
from the school shouldn't go back to school for fun.
That is up to this body, sir, to determine.
The schools cannot have any reserve balance at the end of the fiscal year. It all rolls back into the general fund. The mechanism that we've used in the past, and this budget year is definitely a different beast, is we've rolled a bunch of that into capital items, whatever they turn back in. This year, originally, and we've talked about it with them, they were talking about rolling back, I think, 325 from capital into their budget. It's kind of a question whether or not what we want to do with it, and any rollover we have has to go into operations at this point. And it doesn't matter if you want to put it in, you can say it's for capital, but we're just going to fill the gap with the general fund no matter what. So it's just what it is. Anybody else got anything? Jim?
No, I'm gonna shut up at this point.
It's
Well,
And again, I know it took the long way home, but you said positions. They didn't say more positions. They said in order to keep from cutting additional positions, we propose foregoing these CIP assets.
Okay, well, no, shut up, Jim. Thank you. Appreciate the clarification.
The next slide is the outside agency funding. And again, there's two green columns, the original request in the Board of Supervisors recommended amounts. We did flat funding across the board except for those agencies that we can't do flat funding for, that we don't have that flexibility. So as you can see, the original increase was 9.4%. or $2.2 million total, and now it is $2,092,318, and it's 4.1% change, the reduction of $108,000. And then at the very bottom, that gives you a summary of both, or of all, and the slide you just looked at in this one, so total with outside agencies is $2.2 million in expense cuts. Any questions on this one? Go to the next slide. The next slide is the FY 26-27 capital breakdown. This is after our meeting with the schools. I put this revised together. You'll probably recognize this from our meeting with Davenport, or that breakdown I had with Davenport's presentation. What I've highlighted in green are any changes from that original copy. For the fan coil units, we shifted that to the right, and those are per school direction, talking to Dr. Timmons. The school buses, as you recall, that you took down to 150 per year. The facilities vehicle, that shifted to the right. The facilities and CIP project, that number is more reality. I reduced it, the rollover, and remove the ambulance. If we're going to be leasing ambulances in the future and not paying cash for them, I took that amount out. So for basically the CIP facility study, it's $118,000 needed in FY26 for the facilities CIP items, and $632,990 next year. And then as you go down the list, there's the green in the school section there on the right, the green. This was the reprioritization that Dr. Timmons did on these items per your request. Basically, his comment was we can spread these out over a few years instead of doing it all at once. For example, the repoint brick, he had a figure of $644K, and I spread that over 5 years. And I spread all of them over 5 years per his direction that are in green there. The study report, initially, the board, I know, I think it was last meeting, you said no on the study report. The comment from Dr. Timmons and from Superintendent Anagram was that that study report is really essential for them to going forward for deciding on what projects, capital projects they should fund based on any sort of reorganization that they do. So for example, if they were to empty one building and consolidate into one building, kind of how she put it, they really need to understand the impact of that by going into, is that the best way to say it, emptying a building out and going into one building? Is that administration or schools?
I don't, thank you for that. I don't know if I don't think they divulged a full plan. I think they're thinking of concepts.
Yeah, just concepts
yeah.
to save money. And so their comment was if we want to reorganize the school system, we really need that study to figure out those items. So that's why we put it back on the FY27, just because it's highly recommended for their reorganization.
I'd just like to add to that. I mean, even if you say, look, forego it, we said that last week, or if you just want to take it off the board, maybe another approach is to see what you look like at the end of FY25 before we close out on the county side or the schools. I fully support this, but I work at your direction. Because here's my concern. I mean, I have the 10-year or 15-year list, whatever it is, of the schools. And you're going to get to a point here in a minute as far as loans and stuff like that, I know, Jennifer. But for me, if I'm trying to process, because she's going to talk about debt service in a minute, what are you going to group together? Or what would you forego if you have newer information? I would recommend that report be done before budget cycle next year. If you want it sooner, that's up to you all. But really, I think that would be the telltale sign of what makes sense to fund via debt service, what makes sense to wait if you get to some large capital need. Some of those large capital needs, if they're major overhauls, is not your normal 20-year or 25 or 30-year fixed. You could push out to 40 years, depending on what it is. Not advocating for it at this time. I'm just all about more information that we can have to provide you all when it comes to consider debt servicing.
Pull it off CIP and roll it if we have funds available.
And-
That'll work.
And the last item, the elevator, the clarification on the elevator was that it is a replacement, it's not a repair. So that was, we asked, is that a real number, is that accurate? And he said, absolutely it is. So if you look at the total between FY26 and 27 at the bottom, you can see that we were able to get that $20+ million figure down to the 6.1, or what was it last time? I can't recall, but with the schools, it's 3.864, and for the county, it's 2.3 million over 2 years, for a total of I'm going to round it, 6.2 million in capital projects that need to be done. Any questions on the capital items? All right, now getting into the scenarios. The first scenario I'm presenting to you represents a 3-cent increase in the real estate tax rate and no additional debt funding until FY27. So next year and not this upcoming budget year. If you look at the very bottom right, you can see, putting all of the pieces into the puzzle, the opening balance appropriation is $3,245,266, and that includes capital, which is the middle column there. So no debt funding, 3-cent increase, we would still pull $3,245,266 from unassigned fund balance to fund. Yeah. The
And
next,
that leaves us,
I'm gonna, yeah, and I'll
oh, okay.
I'll give you on one slide what that leaves you.
Okay.
The next slide is this in scenario one, what does the financial estimates look like? This just shows you what your rainy day 18% fund amount needs to be. It's the $8.8 million needs to be there in unassigned fund balance. So $8,862,443. Your asset maintenance replacement and enhancement policy is calculating at $880,489. The contingency amount in operating is coming out to be $293,390. And then at the bottom, these are your stabilization reserve funds. The debt and budget stabilization reserves is calculating to be $1,377,340 for each. And then that joint services stabilization reserve that we were talking about with CSA and BPA, Regional Jail, and the detention center is, it's $348,691. So those are the financial estimates that go along with scenario one. And here's unassigned fund balance. The 2006 line, as you can see, is right on 18%. We barely make it, but we make it. 18% is what would come off of unassigned fund, or excuse me, not come off of, but that would be what is remaining. That would be the percentage of total expenditures. So you would go from 12.1 million in unassigned fund balance in FY25 down to 8.8 million in FY26. And then at the bottom, I just put a breakdown of what fund balance is broken up into and some notes on the side between non-spendable, restricted, assigned, and unassigned, just to put some notes to help anyone who's not sure how that works. But restricted is our unspent bond proceeds, our opioid funds, our toppings fund, and any donation money. Non-spendable is just prepaid expenses. The assigned fund balance is your debt and budget stabilization money, your joint stabilization money, your capital project money, and any opening balance appropriation amount sits in assigned. And then your unassigned is what's left over and available during times of economic downturn. And again, we know the minimum is 18% of total expenditures. So estimating fund balance from FY25 to 26 goes from $23,797,884 for total fund balance down to $20,552,618 is the estimate between the 2 years on scenario one. So you go from 25.1% down to 18%, the percentage. Any questions on that?
Well, I just want to explain the opening balance appropriation amount again, and how much is that one?
That amount is, let's go back up to scenario one. Go to scenario one. At the bottom of scenario one,
It's $3.2 million.
it's $3,245,266.
Yeah, okay,
To
yeah.
balance the budget.
Right.
And it puts,
And that's with the 3-cent real estate tax,
Oh,
correct?
leaving the unassigned.
Correct.
Okay, so you take it out of unassigned and roll it up into that.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
but that's with the 3-cent tax
Yeah.
increase
Yeah.
and being just above the 18% policy that we have in place.
Right.
We can go to
Yep.
scenario two now. The first one. The next is scenario two. This scenario represents a 2-cent increase in the real estate tax rate and taking on $6 million in additional debt funding and reinvesting it in SNAP funds. The reason for the $6 million number is looking at the capital needs over the next 2 years, being that 6.2. $6 million makes the most sense. I did speak to Davenport today and went over some figures with them to just ensure that all of this is accurate. The highlighted in yellow on the right, one thing to keep in mind, the first highlighted column, revenue from use of money and property, we will see an increase in interest income of about $157,000, and that's just using a conservative 3.5% rate over 9 months, having the funds in SNAP. So our interest income would go up about $157,000 if we did a $6 million loan around that September-October timeframe. Down further, the principal retirement and interest would go up by $156,000. And interesting, it's pretty much exactly the same as the interest income. So the debt payments of $156,000, extra interest of $157,000, so it's pretty much a wash. I did talk to Davenport about when the first payment is due, and he mentioned that it's possible to push the payments to start in FY27 on the additional debt service, $6 million. We could do that, we could make it work, but it's really just kicking the can down the road. But it is an option for the county. The issuance of long-term debt, as you see, that 2.8, the reason it says 2.8 and not 6 million is because although you're gonna get 6 million in funding in the SNAP account, we only need 2.8 million for capital projects in FY26. We don't need the full 6 million. So whatever we don't need sits in that SNAP account earning interest. And the goal would be only use the $6 million for capital. So, if the board between now and the decision on how much debt funding, if you do decide to do debt funding, there's flexibility if you decide we're gonna take capital down another million, or you could take on 5 million instead of 6. But 6 is the number I put in here based on this spreadsheet. But the goal, again, is just to have the debt funding in place for capital. And then at the bottom, you can see the opening balance appropriation figure goes down to $723,208 if we add the debt funding. And what that tells us is because the 2.8 in debt funding is covering the 2.8 in capital expenses, our deficit of 723 is really our operating. That's the gap right now in operating with a 2-cent increase. So we can't close the gap completely on operating to have a break-even balanced budget on operating. It's still a deficit of 723,000 that we're having to pull out to balance operating with 2-cent increase. I'll pause there for any questions on this.
Anybody have anything?
Next one.
Keep going, Ms. Warren.
The unassigned fund balance, this is what it looks like in this scenario. As you can see, the unassigned fund balance as a percentage of total expenditures goes from that 18 to, it stays at 23%. And the unassigned amount is 11,384,501. And total fund balance between the 2 years of FY25 and 26 is 23,797,000 in FY25 and 23,074,000 in FY26. So we're keeping our cash and we're earning interest instead of draining our fund balance, and then keeping our ratio up way above the 18% here. This is just a reminder from Davenport's presentation of what the debt service impact looks like on 6 million. So you can see the existing debt that we have in the left side of the chart on the left. The interim financing is the first 2 years, FY26 and 27, and then it would go from interim financing to the long-term financing, or for 7 years in FY28. It would roll into that. So your total in FY28 would be $2.8 million in the debt service or debt funding. And then this was just a reminder of what that, on the right there, what the permanent financing and the bar graphs and how it trails off in 2035, back down. And again, the main reason for choosing 7 years from the last meeting, 2 things. One is you don't want, with the kind of expenses we're doing, we don't want long term on this money. These aren't long term big structures we're building. These are more ambulance or buildings, or not buildings.
Assets last about
Assets,
that.
right, replacement value. And also in 2034, as I mentioned, or 2035, as I mentioned to Kyle, we need to have the ability, if we have a big construction project around that time, we want to make sure this is paid off, because I know that there's something down the road we might have to plan for in construction. So that's the reason for 7 years. Next slide. And this is, again, from the Davenport presentation. The recommendation was 2 cents increase in FY '26 and 1.5 cent in FY '27. And that would generate an additional revenue from tax increases of like $980,000 if you did it over the 2 years, the 3.5 cents. Next slide. This is just one more slide on Davenport's analysis. This is your debt ratios. The red line represents the line that you don't want to go above. And as you can see, we would still be well within our debt versus assessed value ratio. And we would be well within our debt service versus governmental expenditure ratio with this additional debt funding. And this assumes 0% annual growth, by the way, for FY '25 assessed value. All right. And then the scenario 3 is the last one. This is a scenario with a 2 cent real estate tax increase in FY '26 and no additional debt funding in FY '26. What does that mean? What would that mean for the county? We would have to find another $300,000 in expenses to cut to maintain our 18% rainy day fund. And we would need debt funding in FY '27 because we would be well below the 18%. The cons for scenario 3, less interest income because we're using up cash, lower fund balance, obviously, and then a reduction in essential county functions from additional expense cuts that would be needed. Next slide. And this is my last slide, and then we can have dialogue again. The key takeaways: currently, we do not have enough revenue to pay for our capital needs. Additional debt funding is needed no matter what scenario we choose. A tax increase is needed in order to sustain our fund balance and pay for our capital. And the goal is to find new revenue sources over the next few years in order to support capital. But in the interim, until that time, if we're going to be able to take care of our buildings and do any sort of capital improvements, this additional debt financing is needed, even with a tax increase, because the tax increase is really just helping to close the gap on operating.
If I get my microphone, a couple of things I'd like to point out. Excellent, by the way. So looking at where we were before, Jennifer was talking about the trimming or reduction on the 2 fiscal years of 26, 27. I think the last time we said in here, it was a total of almost 12 million. So she has, put pen to paper, and that's now down to 6.1, almost 6.2. So there's a difference there. Superintendent's here. I think it is worth noting. I appreciate the notes going back to the comment about positions. The 677 number that the school revised based on conversations in this room when they heard during the workshop did represent, them getting to that number represented a cut of 5.5 positions. Also worthy to put out, I think the governor's additional adjustment. They were originally set to get 240,000 just over for the support cap positions. Now they're gonna, I think they're gonna lose about 160,000 of that. So there's that additional need that I think the superintendent would speak to, so.
And also, Commissioner Daniel is here, and he made a very good point that I would like to make sure that you're aware of. If the rate is changed to 52 cents, the first half regarding bill will hit in FY '25, generating more revenue than anticipated for FY '25. So that's kind of something that, just to keep in mind as well, is based on the billing cycle of real estate, it would impact also FY '25. How much revenue?
Stab at a guess? 280. But it's probably, so with that, I think it's a very good point.
280 for a year, 140.
For half a year,
Yeah.
because it's half in FY '25, half in FY '26.
All right. Who has comments on this?
I don't like borrowing money till I need it, but
I think it's gotta be scenario two. The 2 cent on top of the 1.5 cents is, none of it's palatable. Nobody likes tax increase in any way. But I think that if we do that and then we put it into the SNAP fund, gain interest off of it, we can cover the expense of taking that and leaving our, fund balance above, undesignated fund balance at 23 instead of being right down to the bare bones at 18%, which cuts us very close and definitely does not set us up for next fiscal year in any way. And we've been doing beginning appropriations now for how many years? Since Dan Campbell was here, so that's 6 maybe. If we don't do anything, then we're gonna be in a bad way next year. The other side of this, and that's why I was asking about CIP and potentially being able to do something next week, is utilizing that borrowing capacity at 6 million. I think that we need to meet with the schools and we need to really hammer into that list and come up with a realistic list for the next 2 years. The sheet you've been asking for, he has an updated one that was turned out in March. I think that we need to work off of that and really prioritize what needs we have. If we postpone it a year, it's not gonna help us anything, what it really looks like tonight. But I would like to see that number from 6 drop down. If we could get down to 5 or 4, that would definitely put us in a better fiscal position.
CIP number.
Yes.
And one
No,
more,
no, not CIP number. It's CIP number, but correlated to the potential taking on additional debt.
Oh.
So dropping the 6 down to hypothetically 5 or 4 million certainly would put us in a better position. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
and I would like to make one point here. If you were to decide to take on debt funding for the county, as you see on the screen, to be able to service that debt, not only would there need to be 2 cent increase this year, there would need to be 1.5 cent next year, just to reiterate that. Davenport did say, when I talked to Kyle today, he said if you're cutting the capital down like you are, like you say you are, that amount, you could probably get away with 1 penny next year. So instead of 3.5 cents total, 3 cents between the 2 years.
Okay, so you didn't run a scenario with less than the 6 million debt funding, though?
I didn't, but my recommendation is to, whatever you come up with as far as your capital needs for 2 years, that's what you borrow. If it's 4 million, 4 million is what you borrow, not 6. It really, I'd use 6 because that's what's on, that tied as close as possible to where we had in the capital. But since the goal of this funding is capital, only borrow what is needed for the next 2 years in capital until the county can get into a pay-as-you-go again, a better way of paying as you go for a lot of the capital items.
You talked about increasing revenues in the coming years. We need to do that as a county, right? Which means more business coming in, and Jim and the group is working really hard on that. But do we have an idea, like, what kind of business numbers we need to come up with so we don't run into this scenario every single year?
Well, as you can see on the operating in scenario 2, right now with a 2 cent, your gap is 700 and something. So 200, if you, yeah, if you assume $280,000 for every penny, take that 7 and divide it by 280, that tells you how much you need to go up to. And that's just to balance operating. Now, with the capital, to be able to pay as you go with capital, you know, that's even more. So the problem is, right now there's no big construction projects going on as a county, but these capital items, we don't have the revenues to pay for.
So I think if you asked what that number was this year, kind of to Mr. Buchanan's point, it would be, 723, almost 725. We don't know what next year is. If it's inflation, we'll continue, that number could continue to grow. And again, just running through some, I need to zoom back out so I can get my site right. We go back and look at things that have dropped off. I don't mean to keep beating a dead horse, but I think it's worthy of stating. We're fully funding an SRO that was covered some grant. We had a reduction in basic school aid. Local sales tax, you might squeeze, I think, another 100,000 above last year, so it's not a lot. New construction's down. We had, between Plow and Hearth and I think Rock Hill Lumber, when they went out of business, that was a hit. I can't remember the number. It's probably not quite 100,000, but it's probably at least half of that. So there are just some things that collectively add together that is hitting all at one time. And then you got new things like, and it's contractual when we need it, but you take maintenance on the radio tower. That's almost 300,000 for the next 15 years. So it's just things that are compounding year over year that we've had the benefit of pay as you go, but we're running out of that.
There will be some new construction in this upcoming year and some fairly large new construction. MWK.
I don't know what their timetable
Yeah,
is.
I
We
mean,
need to
but
ask
that's a
them
big,
that.
but that's a
Yeah.
big one.
Yeah, and I don't know what,
You got
is
meal
Tot
tax.
down? But as far as the Airbnb, is that down like 30-some%? I thought I heard a number like that before, so. So, I mean, all those factors collectively is kind of where we're at. Revenues are just, remember before, we were kind of neck and neck the last, 3-4 years, and this year it has really shown itself.
What do you say, Jim?
Ms. Warren, I agree with your logic on this. I'm not disagreeing with this, but there's a couple of things that I worry about short term and then long term. If we borrow money and we have it sitting in an account, the SNAP account, and if, as Mr. Daniel said, we're going to probably anticipate some extra money in '25. Whenever there's money sitting there, there's a moral hazard that goes along with it. Okay, there's money sitting there, now I want some of it. And, are we going to be able to maintain the discipline to keep our spending trajectory where it needs to be? That's one concern. The other concern I have is, we've been doing the economic development planning. Are we going to, even under, let's say, an expected value that we could get from economic development plan, which we're working hard on, and we're going to work harder on, are we going to be able to continue, or are we going to be able to outgrow our spending needs with additional development? I mean, can we grow our way out of this problem long term without really looking at, over time, significant escalating tax increases? Those are just some things I'm throwing out there. Those are some strategic things that worry me. And I think that's something we need to really be conscious of as we plan for the next 5 years, 10 years. Because, the federal government, that's a poor example, but there's and I've seen this all my life. In my lifetime, there have only been 2 balanced federal budgets. Because what happens is, well, we're going to increase spending or cut taxes, and we're going to grow our way out of the problem. But the problem is they just want to keep spending more money. And see, we don't have the luxury of a printing press. And I think that, as we've said before, in economic development and in these budget meetings since I've been on the board, you've got to try to get out and ahead of this, in front of this, as far as you can, to avoid coming up one year and then all of a sudden it's like, what happened? We're in a serious hole. And I agree, Ms. Warren, I think that's, we're kind of getting a peek into that right now. So I don't know, I don't have the answers, but I'm thinking that, you know, I would tend to go with Ms. Warren's recommendations. You know, it's gonna, although ultimately it's gonna result in some hard choices we're gonna have to make. Anyway, that's my 2 cents on it.
Well, after, Jim, your presentation the other night at the board meeting, I took your spreadsheet and I did my own stuff. And sure enough, like you were relaying to the public, my house in Etlin went up 71%. My farm where I grew up went up 37%, okay? So now you equalize that stuff, and I am like $15 extra at the equalized rate. So if I went to the 3 cents, I would have to pay $328 more a year, $27.37 a month for those two pieces of property. And I just have a feeling that you were saying that that's going to play out like that a lot of places. So I really have no problem with the 3 cent increase this year. But
Is that scenario one?
It is. Scenario 1 is a 3-cent
but that's-
increase
But
and
that
waiting
drops
until,
That drops you down so far on that.
right,
on that,
we got to figure.
Yeah.
There's got to be another way to
That's right.
to not drop that.
well, one thing also to keep in mind is, as a county overall, we don't know what FY '25 is going to look like and how we're going to end. I have tried to do as close of an analysis as I can for the county side. And we have a pretty tight budget. We may turn back a couple $100,000. It's not anywhere near 1.2. The reason we had 1.2 is because CSA left a lot of money that they didn't use in FY '24. There was like 625,000 from them that got turned back from last year, FY '24. So for us on our side, it may be a couple $100,000. The schools, they're not ready to predict that, and like we talked about, until May. So, but traditionally, we've always had money that has gone back to fund balance at the end of a year. So just wanted to throw that in there, that's another thing to think about with scenario 1. Although it gets you down to that 18%, historically, there's always been money that goes back that will probably bring that up from the 18%. I did ask Davenport the question about taking on additional debt funding like this year and, next year, doing it, instead of doing one big chunk of $6 million, why not do 2 to 3 now and a little bit more next in FY '27? And it makes sense. The answer is you're going to pay more in fees, obviously. You're going to pay more broker's fees, you're going to pay more closing costs to do it annually, instead of for a 2-year period. So that's why the recommendation from them comes in at, look at your capital for a 2-year window and then decide what you need in funds for those capital items for over the 2-year period to save on all those fees.
So you could
Looks like scenario 1 or scenario 2 requires 3 cents. Is that fair? One has debt service, one doesn't.
Well,
The question becomes in that you got one board encumbering another. I realize all that. So that's the really only difference I see is that, you've got one, if you got down to 2 pennies this year, but that 6 million is going to require you to, another board, at least we're going to make that request to make our debt service payment, you're going to have to do the other, unless you borrow less. I still subscribe to, if you do that study report, and as to Clay's point, if you all agree, CIP meeting could meet next week, maybe kind of narrow it down, but even if I'm in their shoes, you can narrow it down in group, but that report would kind of maybe give you an idea of what would you defer versus what would you address now. Maybe there's some areas you want to do windows now because it's so far out, but maybe there are other things on that list, electrical or things that you would not touch if you're doing something else. So
Just to-
again, I think the report is a good investment
And
of
just to
money.
clarify, scenario 1 is 3 cents, but scenario 2 is only 2
Is
pennies.
that two?
2 penny,
No,
but with
it's
debt
2
service.
this year,
Yeah.
but then you're
You gotta do the
projecting
1.5.
out a 1.5 the next year.
That was my
which
comment
you
on
can't
encumbering.
encumber.
Okay,
You
thank
can't
you.
encumber another board. So another board could come and say, we're gonna cut all of this stuff out, and then it wouldn't require the 1 penny. But with intentions of this fiscal year and passing a balanced budget like we are required to do by law, you can always start planning with this play. And it is a tool.
Right. But going with the 3 cents now does not encumber anybody. You could go 3 cents and, I don't know, 5 million in debt or something like that, right?
Yeah, definitely have time to decide on the number for the debt service because that would not close until October, I believe. So there's no rush on deciding how much for the debt funding.
That's why I'm recommending we go back and we look at the CIP list and see if we can actually come up with this is a number we think we can stick with. That, and we know there's gonna be
Over 2 years.
Over 2 years, yes, sir. But we're looking, I mean, you remember the report, I mean, the report looks out 10 years
Yeah.
to like 2040. And there's obviously items on there that are a little lofty.
And keep in mind with the SNAP account, the gatekeeper is our treasurer. And the way it works now is
That was my big
when we have
concern.
expenses, capital approved expenses for the radio project that the board has to approve, nobody else can approve the capital but you. Once that expense is completed, I send something to Stephanie showing her that this expense has happened, and then she transfers money from that SNAP account over out of that. So that's the gatekeeping of money can't just be flowing other than what you've approved in capital.
Until you're all said and done, if you have something left over, then the board has the ability to move that money into unassigned fund balance somewhere.
Or you can turn it back into the institution to
Yeah.
where you borrowed it.
Yeah.
If there's no penalty or whatever that may be.
What other comments are there, or questions? Go.
Too much today. And I'm looking at this from a political standpoint as well as a practical one. If we're gonna raise taxes 3 cents, do 3 cents, not 2 cents this year, 1.5 next year. Because the public's gonna say, are you raising taxes every year?
Right.
And, you know, this would give us a little running start and some cushion on some of these other issues that are definitely gonna pop up at some time. The other problem, and going back to what Cardi was saying, and this is what we went over on the spreadsheet with the increase in taxes, because I hate to have an increase in taxes, anybody does. But you know, in 4 years, inflation's gone up 17%, 25% for groceries, 25% for housing, 34% for energy, and our tax on that we pay on our houses and property has gone up 0. So it's not unreasonable to have some upward adjustment in the tax rate. I think we all agree on that. And of course, the issue is how do we responsibly raise taxes but also not allow our spending to get out of line with that? Because that's just human nature. If you make more money personally, your tendency is to spend more money personally. And then when you're in the public and you're spending somebody else's money, it's really easy to spend somebody else's money. And we just don't, we have traditionally in this county for over 200 years held the line on our spending and been disciplined. I do not want to breach that tradition. So that's enough.
Well, I think historically, we could show the citizens of this county, almost every department in the whole county comes in under budget, so we got that going for us, you know, the whole county does.
And I just would point to the chart. Look, different scenarios, whatever, I'm just gonna use the one that's on the screen. If you go to that far right column, unassigned fund balance starting in 2023, I think what you can also say is that you have utilized your fund balance policies and made decisions on funding, whether it's operating or capital, based on your reserve balance. You didn't raise taxes because you had 30%, 31%, 25%, and that's why there was a lot of selection of pay-go for your capital project. So I think that also shows fiducial responsibility. The 18% just kind of shows you the crossroads that you will face in the future, based on that revenue and expenditure discrepancy.
I use the same thing I used the other night, is by going with the 3 cents instead of the 2, you're emphasizing to tear the Band-Aid off and just be done with it. Which you make good points. The other side though, does that include doing some type of, taking on some type of debt?
Well, let's see.
Getting close to that 18% line, I think is, we're getting in territory of danger.
My recommendation to the board, if you do decide to raise to 3 cents, would be to potentially wait until FY '27 for the debt funding. You could do that, so you
Yeah.
have more time to really see how FY '25 shakes out. But either way, you will have to take on debt funding for, either in FY '26 or '27. There's no way around that, even with a 3 cent increase, based on what we show in capital needs.
What's the turnaround time if, when you say, okay, I want to borrow $6 million, when does it get in my bank account? Would take, what, 3 or 4 months?
I don't think so. I will go back to his slide. Davenport had the next steps with what to do. Let me
Yeah.
take a look at that, and I'll answer that in a minute.
Got anything, Judd?
No, go ahead, Dustin.
I'll probably be slaughtered for this one, but I'm telling you, the county needs to do a business license. I am paying business license tax everywhere else except here. And I would much rather write a check to my county than every other surrounding county. And I'd rather write it out of my business account than my personal account.
Yeah, that, and I also thought about, we didn't talk any further about personal property taxes, and so do you have any gauge on where, the reason we lowered it was, there was a good reason for that. Where is it headed now, you think? Likely,
Zillan?
yeah.
It appears depreciation is corrected itself,
Uh-huh,
and the vehicle, and again, we don't know what everything else is,
right.
If you listen to the news, this statement may not be true. However, at this point in time, it appears that depreciation of vehicles has corrected itself, and it's back to a typical 10% depreciation year over year. And, when we were in that model, we had that 360
Right,
tax rate.
correct. And we're at 340
We're
right
at
now.
340, correct.
So what is 10 cents worth? Was it 10?
145, is that
173?
yeah, that's right, yeah.
It was what?
173.
Is what, 10
Or
cents
no.
is worth?
It's one
Sorry, thank you.
157.
Jeez.
It's all right.
7 is.
157. I know it's
Okay.
small, sorry.
No, it's me.
10 cents is 157, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So, I guess, we just need a little sense of direction now. The advertisement for the public hearing on the 22nd has occurred. That is the up to 3 cent consideration on the real estate.
Yeah.
No other variance of taxes, meaning no proposed increases in others.
Personal property would not be part of that.
It would be.
It would be.
That's part of our overall scheduled list
So
of
we
of
did not
tax rates.
advertise for an increase in that one.
Correct. I know we talked about, should we not? I think the comment, if it was a majority, at least some of you said it doesn't have the bang, if you will. That's probably terrible because it's taxpayer money. But as far as the real estate adjustment brings you more in line than personal.
Well, I was just looking at, we're trying to close a three, if you take scenario three, trying to close a $300,000 gap. There's 157. You know,
314 if you do 20 cents, go back to 360.
yeah, go back to 360, yeah. That's right.
And
I'm
then
sorry,
it would
that's
make
what I
your,
meant.
it would make your beginning appropriation 2,931,266. And that would put you, how much, what would that make the percentage, Ms. Warren?
About 20 or something.
Oh.
Yeah, that sounds about right. I would have
Somewhere.
to do the numbers in my spreadsheet.
But we didn't advertise for that, so we'd have to do some type of adjustment to it if.
We just
There has
have to
to be
have an
one,
approved budget before May 15th, because there's rules in place when we have to pass and
we-
transmit that over to the schools.
What do y'all think? I mean, we reduced it when we needed to reduce it.
We equalized it every time.
Yeah. And now we're back to square one.
But do is the comment do 3 cents and then adjust personal property up 20 cents?
That's what I say. I know,
That's a lot.
yeah.
That's a lot. And I mean, that's a lot.
What if, I'm just throwing what ifs, you tell me.
Yeah.
If the concern is borrowing the money, if the concern is what are we borrowing it for, what projects? You all just talked about, CIP committee can meet, to maybe refine that list some and so forth. We talked about a study report that will look at those things that are on that list and beyond, and maybe that makes you defer. You have time if you did the 3 cents, yes, you hit the 18% this year. Maybe it goes a little higher, maybe you get to 19, depends on what's turned back in. You have your study report come back ahead of the next budget. We'll know what other communities are doing. We'll probably know that when we go to advertise. It's just a lot of communities are in different stages of their budget. We are hearing, sometimes we can't make public because those are private conversations between Jennifer before they advertise. We expect there are gonna be other communities that make shift both in real estate and personal property. But it's trying to not do so much at one time. You can do option one. It does take you to 18%. Try to figure out your capital needs. Then if you go into debt financing, which I believe if you're gonna do anything, in FY '27, you're gonna have some type of debt component. But at least you would have maybe that report back that you can look globally at projects and then review that list again as a whole and make priority decisions.
So I don't know, what do you think, Clay? Scenario two, with the 2 cents, borrow some
If you-
money and take personal property up a dime?
I don't know, the one that we need to check on how to, to do that, we'd have to figure out the mechanism and the timeline to get to that May 15th deadline for the schools, but then also how to re-advertise, because we've already advertised a flat rate on personal property, so we just gotta
Oh.
figure that out. The one that's the other play on it, I'm not saying it's the best play by any means, but would be to leave personal property where it's at, and go to 3 cents on real estate, and then try to narrow down the CIP list, so that we come up with something more obtainable. The two comments that come to mind, first off, is one, multiple different people over years, and I think that we can show that we have actually, to some extent, been doing that based on beginning appropriation year after year after year, is they would rather see a penny every year to keep up with inflation, cost of living, everything that goes along. So doing a 3 is, even with your justification, which makes perfect sense, and
Yeah, 4 years,
is
yeah.
super easy to run, 3 cents is a bunch for a lot of people. The other comment that comes to mind on scenario 2 is doing the 2 and 1.5 or 1. It doesn't really matter, and that we can't obligate future boards. The same goes for doing the 3 cents, doing the large beginning appropriation, and then looking at with Ms. Warren's recommendation that we are going to have to do some type of financing in '27, you can't hold the board to that either. So, I mean, you could be back at the same spot, and saying, oh, we've got to do another large tax increase, and that will start getting into people.
I don't like borrowing money, but scenario number 2, without touching
3
the
cents.
personal property. No,
What-
2 cents. I mean, because what if things go good this year? We have a good year,
There,
revenues are a little better. Next year, we're
There
sitting in a
should-
better place.
That's a good point.
there should also be, like, meals tax, we know should be
Yes.
going up. We hope that there's other facilities that will be coming in online here promptly, and that's not huge money, but it is real money. And then also, we will see some gains off of this just based on the way it works.
In the discussion that we had on personal property tax, even though right now the depreciation rates are going back to the normal trend lines, we still have too much uncertainty with what will play out with tariffs and whatnot with vehicle values this year, and it's just kind of like trying to chase a moving target, so it's probably
Yeah.
best just
What-
to leave it.
What about going at this? What about going at this? We meet CIP, we'll come back, if Cardy's available and the schools are available to meet next Tuesday, see if we can whittle that $6 million number down, to something better. We have Ms. Warren run the numbers with that number at 2-cent increase, and then we can kind of see where we get next week. We don't have a meeting scheduled next Thursday. I think we have to. There's no option here. What am I missing, Cardy?
That sounds like an approach, yeah.
It's not the best. Also, it'll give them time to see if there's the ability. My main concern, and it was exactly where you were at, exactly, and I said to them in the room, was if we have $6 million sitting in a bank account, what's going to stop us from dipping into that? And I think that's something we have to be exceedingly conscious of, because then the revenue from the interest will go down, and it'll put the county in a bigger hole, and that is a real problem.
Yeah, I thought when we borrowed the money in 2020, that there was prohibitions against using it for anything other than what we had specified, the schools and this and the radio.
You can use it for any county or school project. We had bond council rule on that, because really they're the ones that determine
As
it.
long as it had been a capital project of some
Correct.
sort.
You couldn't supplant operational.
I see, okay.
I will mention, anything that's foregone in FY '26 will, right now, it's sitting over in FY '27, so I mean, it's still there.
And I'm sorry, and I'm sure I'm looking at it 100% wrong. I think things like paving has to come directly off the list. I mean, and that's, between the schools and all us, I mean, you're talking $3 million worth of paving. Items like that, until we're driving on gravel, I'm sorry, I just don't see it as a critical need.
Another clarification now with the projected budget, have we determined whether the vehicle purchases versus lease, has that been resolved, clarified, as far as, the ambulance, assuming we're gonna lease them now instead of buy them?
Yeah, that's what, in the scenarios, we put leasing for those and not purchase. So ambulance, we wouldn't have to lease an ambulance in FY '26. That would come in FY '27, I believe.
That's correct,
If we
and,
didn't.
and the leases would need to be scheduled to the asset, meaning if it's a 5-year asset or a 7-year asset, we would not recommend, nor, we shouldn't be borrowing something out beyond, or leasing it beyond the term of the asset. And I believe what was shown to us by the, I'm gonna say dealer, whoever the company is, was 5-year or 7-year options, but it would be leased. The reason for a lease recommendation, and I'm sure all you're aware of this, it just helps lower the overall annual cost to do business around here, because again, $1 million easily, you get into it with buses, 4 police cars, and, an ambulance. You hit that number real quick, and we need all those things. It's nobody's fault, but leasing is what made that a little more attractive to be able to afford things as a whole.
So the leasing options were considered for the sheriff's vehicles as well or not?
No.
No, because they are generally a 4-year asset, and of course, Sheriff's Constitutional Office, I don't believe they prefer, we've talked about it, so they've at least considered it, but it wasn't their recommendation. And we looked at 4 years. I don't know if we could get a 4-year. If so, the lease would have been substantially higher versus, when the time you get to the end of the 4 years, you'd have had a lot more money invested versus purchasing.
We did put leasing into the EMS operating budget for FY '26 for their mechanical CPR device. I think that's what it's called. And one other device,
Like
cardiac monitor, those 2 pieces of equipment.
Okay, so
What are you thinking down there?
scenario 3 is out. Okay, I'm just going back through them again. Yeah, I think you gotta scrub the CIP. And,
You gotta borrow something, and it is solely on the basis that interest income. And that plays into it, and it gives us a little bit of flexibility, having that higher, percentage as far as undesignated reserve, so that we do have options moving forward.
Can I ask for some clarity, just because I'm.
Oh, no, it depends on what you ask.
At least from a calendar
see here
standpoint,
shortly.
so, I hear we're gonna meet as a CIP committee to go through that list.
On Tuesday.
And I think we have some time before we advertise the budget, because I think our drop deadline on that would probably be the 28th, or preferably the 25th, getting that out the door. We have a little bit of time there. You meet again on the 22nd. Personal property, and go back to that. Are we leaving that at the 340? Are we looking to, I just need to know if I'm re-advertising tax rates.
It sounds like most everybody wants to leave it alone.
All right, so that advertisement's good. So that'll be done on the 22nd for you all to make a decision. Am I hearing that you would like to have another workshop, Mr. Chairman?
Yeah, next Thursday.
Next Thursday. So we will advertise that as a special meeting for that purpose. You'll have your regular meeting on the 22nd. Of course, we know we have a couple public hearings that day. If you want to do something, you wouldn't have your hearing on your budget because that's the 13th, and you can't do that the same night anyway as your tax rate. You can discuss things like, hey, want to go back and direct you to plus up or minus a certain category. So we'll advertise for the 17th. Are we thinking the same time, the 3 p.m.?
I think when we come next week, if anybody's got ideas, and come with your ideas. At the end of next week's meeting, we should be pretty close to wrapping this up. Until we hear from the public, and then we may shift like crazy again, but that's just what it is.
So on the 17th, we're looking to, you'll tell us scenario 1, 2, or maybe there's a new.
Yeah, we're probably gonna come up with, like a
Hybrid.
Roman numeral 1 or something. It'll be different.
Okay. I'm fine on the direction you gave administrative fees, so I can get that out the door. The question will become is what date to set that public hearing. So unless you have a certain date, I'm gonna have to communicate to y'all, probably send an email out individually to you all, just this is what I'm thinking on a date. And then
Sorry, for what?
for the administrative fees public hearing.
Oh.
I just need to see if I'm legally allowed to squeeze that in on the 22nd. If not, you're probably looking at a special meeting, or, I hate to say this, you could have it on your joint meeting on May
Yeah, do that.
7th.
Do that.
Just realize it'll be a long haul based on
Do that.
zoning cases. Okay.
It does look like there's some fun zoning.
Unless you
cases.
want me to advertise to have that before that meeting starts at 7. Do y'all want an earlier start time?
That'd be nice.
Of what? For the,
So your joint meeting's at 7. I could advertise a board meeting earlier, or you can just, that one won't take that long. So as long as you're fine, I'll bring coffee.
What about if we do it at 6? Do
Yeah.
it before the joint meeting. At 7.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
That's to have the public hearing on administrative fees.
Admin budget, or admin fees, we'll do a public hearing on this 7th at 6 o'clock.
I don't know if we need a new motion on the budget calendar.
All right,
think so.
he's questioning whether we've got a.
I think we're
We-
we're fine.
We don't need a motion, we can do it real quick.
Yeah, no, on
We're
the
getting
dates, sure,
creative.
yeah.
What
I
do
was
y'all,
thinking budget
let's do a
calendar.
motion on May 7th at 6 o'clock.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Further discussion? Just for clarity, this is just on the admin fees.
Yes.
All right, that's from the public hearing. Any other discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. All right, there you go.
And then can you please vote on your special meeting for budget for April 17th at 3 PM?
So moved.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. There you go.
Mr. Chairman, is there anything you would like for me, the board, to prepare for next week's meeting or have Davenport available?
Does anybody need to talk to Davenport? Wait.
Okay,
All right,
just
I
wanted
will.
to check.
And what about her, Ms. Warren's first question? Anybody have anything we want to run around to?
Well, I think until we find a revised CIP budget, that's step number one. And then after we see that, we're gonna have to look at what we're gonna do as far as tax increase. 1 year, multi-year, and that would probably help resolve that.
Well, if we can knock it down on Tuesday afternoon, evening, we'll get that number directly to Ms. Warren and see if she can work her magic promptly. That work?
And not to complicate, Mr. Chairman, I probably am, but I don't want to lose the suggestion by Supervisor Dawson. If that's something that
yeah.
this board would like the Economic Development Committee to explore as part of we've got other goals and strategies, certainly we can add that and begin the research
The
that.
business license.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know, I told you all the stories standing outside the last CIP meeting, and the baseball coach came up, very notable businessman. Y'all are losing money because you're not doing the business license. And it's
I've been
not
saying
even.
that for a long time, yeah.
Yeah, no, see, now, people can change, yes, I know, my philosophy may be flawed.
Third eye in my forehead the first time I brought it
Oh,
up.
no, I mean, Dustin's comments are right, just perfect. Anybody else? I think we should ask. Ms. Graham, Tina, anything to add on any of this, or generalized comments? Whatever time works. It's fine. Anybody else?
I didn't want to misstate anything. I think I was trying to cover positions and funding. Is there anything you'd like to address from that front?
Anything you'd like to say?
Testing. You mean like positions we've already cut, or?
Yes, ma'am. I went back, and thank you for the text. I went back and gave that to the board,
Okay.
that the 677, which was a revision based on the feedback this board gave at the workshop, we all were here, that reflected a 5.5 positions reduction, not including if the 310 that was mentioned yesterday, and/or adding the 212K of capital things back into that. But I just wanted to make sure that was on the record and were accurate, not from me,
Right,
but.
yeah,
okay.
we've already cut 5.5 positions.
Anything else?
We just hope
Where are we
not to
gonna
cut
do the
more,
CIP? Here?
whatever you prefer.
I prefer to go to the
Just go down
schools
that
if you don't
Okay.
mind.
Yeah. Does that work?
Well, that's fine. 5:15. I'll send an invite.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything? No, sir. All right, to the public. Brian, you sort of count. All right, anybody watching us? All left, good. All right, what would you like to do?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Motion made, seconded. Further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Thank y'all.
Thank you, Mr.